Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the June episode of the Marketing Society of Scotland's Under the Spotlight. My name's Kat Lever and I'm your host today. I'm delighted to be here with Paul, who I'll introduce shortly. But I hope everyone's keeping well. We're looking forward to hearing from Paul today. I can assure you it's going to be an insightful and honest conversation, having briefly chatted with him beforehand. I'd like to encourage everyone to please use social media to get involved in the conversation. So use the hashtag Under the Spotlight and tag our Twitter account using the handle @marketingsoccsco. We'd also really like to hear your questions, so not just all from me. So please use the Q&A function within Zoom and we'll pick those up at the end after we've heard from Paul. And today's webinar is being recorded, so it will be available post-event if you wish to share it with friends and colleagues. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our guest for today, Paul Graham, who's a board member of the Marketing Society and the Marketing Communications Director for the full Moet Hennessy portfolio across the UK. He's going to talk a little bit today about his career, about his work challenges and learnings. He'll explore the luxury market and talk us through how things are changing in light of the current crisis. So good afternoon, Paul.
Hello, Kat. How are you doing? And hello, everyone. I'm delighted to be here.
Thank you for joining us. I'll hand over to you for your presentation.
Cool. Okay, then. Well, so everyone knows, I'm going to try and stream a presentation with a couple of videos. It's better than me just talking. So if it doesn't work, then I'll blame Zoom. But if it does, then I'll take the credit. How's that? So here we go. Hopefully this is working. There we go. So hello, I've deliberately chosen a cute pic to start off, just in case the content isn't up to scratch. But this will all become clear why I'm using a picture of my 4-year-old self to set up a marketing presentation as a hopefully professional adult. But I'm going to play a quick clip from something that I'm sure you'll recognise, which will allow me to explain why I like to start a marketing presentation with this. Anyway, so in the interest of time, the reason that I'd like to start with basically self-indulgent clip from my first ever and still favourite movie is because at the time that picture was taken, it was around the age I was when I first was taken out of hospital, not a sob story, but just to give you some context, and snuck into a cinema so my father could let me watch this new sci-fi weird film called Star Wars. I was instantly hooked, and the reason that I still sort of bring it up as an adult is it helps me channel that sort of childish wonder that I think it's very easy to lose as adults, but also is almost not used at all, and I think to our detriment in marketing and professional commercial situations, because it locks us into a way of thinking and a way of behaving based on the rules and the learnings that we've already done before, and makes us feel safe. But basically means we never learn, we can't flex, we can't react. And actually that's a bad thing when the world around us is constantly moving, even more so right now, could it ever be more pertinent than it's suddenly become? Because we're now looking at a world that's empty and businesses based on it being full. And it would be the adult way of wanting things to go back to the way they were or never changing in the first place so that we could predict and keep things as we want them and everything would be great. But that's not real. And any child who enters this world finds everything new and adapts to it as they go, asks all the wrong and right questions and keeps that sort of sense of wonder and amazement at every new twist and turn. And channeling that child works for all of us, and actually I think gives us a more healthy approach to not just marketing, but also the minds of our consumers, who are what it's all about, and also enables us to flex and adapt and and move with the world rather than be left behind or want it to never change when it definitely will. So the context that leads me slightly more professionally and getting a little bit more adult is a theme that I constantly come back to in all steps of my career, which is never forget the business that you're in. And that might sound facile, but I don't mean the business that you think you're in. Just to give you a quick couple of examples that happened over the course of me having started talking nicely, the world has helped to prove me on the right line. In fact, the very first time I ever made this point was because of an experience I had when I just started my own creative agency, probably too young an age, and probably slightly foolishly jumped into the idea. On the very first day of my supposed new business, it snowed so badly in the whole of the country that traffic and schools and life stopped on the streets of the city I live in, London.
Paul, sorry to interrupt. Could you go closer to your mic?
Yes, of course I can.
Thank you.
So hopefully that's now loud enough for everyone. If it's not, I'll also cut video more my face just in case it helps the sort of quality of the sound. So it was suddenly forced upon me the realization that the first time ever to navigate around, I hadn't bought one of these in a corner shop because there was this that I used at the time. The iPhone was relatively still a new gadget, and there was this thing called Google Maps on there, which all I had to do was take the phone that I already was using out of my pocket, and I could navigate and get from A to Z without buying a book called A to Z. And that's the classic and probably most tragic example of a business that had cornered the market and actually was the market, forgetting what business it was in, because they believed that how they made their money was what business they were in, which is false. The business they were in was in their name. They're in the business of getting everyone from A to Z, and yet they didn't continue to do that when the world changed around them and technology surpassed them. So when we don't need paper, if we can get to A to Z without the company called A to Z, they lose. So if they'd remembered that they were in that business, they would have been the first map app on iPhones, and it would be a very different environment now. It keeps getting sort of more and more provable because soon after that, this happened as well, where a music industry that made music, which is what business they were in, convinced themselves that actually their business was selling plastic or vinyl that the music came on, and that's where their profits were, that's where their distribution was focused, that's where their entire business model was structured around. And the idea of not being able to make their money according to the way that they structured their supposed business meant that they were caught sleeping and actually caught resisting the way that we all now obviously would prefer to get our music, because it's easier, it's simpler, it was more flexible, and it was more widely available. So therefore, that's how we all shifted, and they should have shifted with us, because their business was still what we want, which was the music, not the physical sort of entity that the music was placed on when it no longer needed to be a physical entity. This still keeps happening, because even the ones that stole off of the music labels keep getting stolen off each other. So they have to keep up. The reason there's constant new innovations and new different music services is because the way that we consume music continues to evolve and change. And as human beings, we'll always go with the best, easiest, most available option. So streaming services have to make sure that they are the best, easiest, and most available option, and they constantly evolve to win share. I think the best possible example that consistently is one of the only companies that I see that bucks this trend and is always focused on the actual business they're in. And even when they spot that that business is changing, they change with it. Facebook originally approached Twitter when Twitter was popular to buy Twitter and make it not a competitor but part of the group. Twitter outright refused, and Facebook's for all of their sort of controversy and all of their bad ways, or their sort of evil approach to the world, the genius of them is proven in these couple of examples. They just changed. They became Twitter, so they didn't need to buy Twitter. And the minute that they became Twitter, we didn't need Twitter either, because we were already on Facebook. We were loving all the other bits of Facebook and only going on Twitter to do live updates. So the minute that the Facebook platform included live updates, where did we do most of our live updates? And so Twitter literally resisted the purchase, thinking that they were the ones that had the higher value, and lost that value because they were caught not being in the right business that we all wanted from any platform, and we went with the one that gave it to them. Again, they kept doing it. This time they did manage to buy Instagram, so that they could not have to change to like beat them, but they just became them and integrate more and more and more. But then once they'd managed this time to sort of integrate rather than to beat off, they tried again and failed for a second time to buy their competitor. And this time Snapchat really probably should have been paying attention, because they were in the same business that Twitter had been in, for a better, more valuable, younger millennial audience. But when they again said, no, we think we're more valuable, we don't want to accept being bought by our competitor, the competitor, now Facebook, did it again and became Snapchat in under 2 weeks. Completely reinvented its entire sort of tech platform and development system in order to beat Snapchat at their own game. And lo and behold, ever since, Snapchat's never quite been the same and never been able to catch back up. That was a very rushed through version of what is normally an hour's presentation, but the bit of all the things I normally sort of believe and talk about, I thought might set us up for today, just because it's so even more relevant at this current scenario where everything around us, for all of us around the globe, has completely and utterly changed from how it was a couple of months ago. But that's okay, because we can remember the business we're in and remember that the one thing that will never change is humanity. We all have desires, we all have motivations, and we all are consumers at the end of the day, even if we professionally talk to other consumers. As long as we don't forget how we work, then we'll always be in better shape than if we act like adults and try and resist change instead of just going with the change we know within ourselves. Our desires and our motivations will never go away. We'll always want what we want. We'll always want to live our lives the way we like to live them. We'll always fill our time in the way that we enjoy most. All that will change around us and change how we get those things that we want will be the context in which it's happening and our options developing to constantly give us newer ways to do the same things or in better ways. So remember, the business is keeping consumers happy, giving what they want, and that they're happy to pay us for. Everything else, including anything internal or any one of our current business models or revenue streams, should change. It's still the right way, and it's still giving consumers what they want tomorrow and forever after. What that means in our business right now, and we've seen this happen very, very quickly in live. I'm sure it's not the only experience like this on this call today. In fact, probably.
Paul, sorry to interrupt again. We're just having problems with your sound.
Oh, it's a real shame. I apologise for that.
I don't know if you can move a little closer.
Get even closer. And I will, for now, I'll cut my video.
The other thing, Paul, if you happen to have them to hand, is if you have headphones with a speaker in them.
I'm afraid I don't. I have everything Apple in my home, and this is a PC, which is the company one. So unfortunately, I can't even connect the two things typically. But we'll try and go through, and I'll get very, very close. The things that I wanted to sort of point out that we've been learning live is we've had to sort of move our entire sort of approach to supporting our brands and introducing our brands and keeping our brands like top of mind and really relevant through physical experiences that we craft and make as beautiful and as immersive as we can, have had to, out of necessity, become all entirely virtual. And by embracing that, they get better and better and better, to the point where now we're seeing that the way that we're now making digital experiences work for us, including surprising people by sending them product to their homes without them thinking there was going to be anything other than just digital, it actually works more strongly. It's a very impressive little touch, and it gives us a lot of extra sort of positive love and warmth, and therefore better coverage, sort of better image perception, even in a world where we can't do how we've always done it before. Every connection, I mean, obviously our entire business is based on selling a product that people like to consume together in the real world, which they now can't. And we didn't even have an online commerce business to speak of. It was done through other people and was a small part of our whole revenue stream. Now, obviously, it's become the key focus. And the more that we've caught up with that, the more it's paid us back, to the point where now I think, and I'm happy about this fact because it's one of my big beliefs anyway, but all of our next year's plans will start with a digital sort of infrastructure and approach, and anything else that we add on that would be physical, we might have done before, will be an add-on after we've made sure that our focus is built on digital. We structure ourselves in two ways of describing the trade industry, which is the on-trade, i.e. Physical spaces at clubs, restaurants, bars, hotels, and then the off-trade, which are off licenses where you buy to bring home. But now all of that has had to be replaced by home trade, which is again sort of delivery, which we've never ever been able to do before, and now suddenly have to teach ourselves very quickly. It's been very easy, I think, because things can be physically present, to forget that availability might be a quick way to sort of get your brands sort of in front of customers, but it's nowhere near as strong as the only thing we have now, because we can't be physically available, memorable. And I think that makes us work harder, but also for the long run, actually build stronger messages and plans and ways of staying in the memory of the right people for the time ever after. So again, it's been a positive change, even though it's been a hard and necessary one. Equally, sales have had to suddenly be replaced by services. If we can't provide the service of getting alcohol to people in their homes, someone else will. So no matter how strong our sales force have been, no matter how strong our distribution or our sales partners may have been in the physical world before lockdown, if we haven't managed to switch to providing a service to them and making them better at providing service to all of our end consumers, we'd still lose. So we're rapidly developing lots and lots of that. And actually, I think it's very creative, and I'm loving seeing how it's not just something that's born out of necessity, but actually becoming something that's really impressive and will stick around once we all go back to life as close to normality as it could ever be. And also, it's also had the upside of making us all focus again on something that I've always held very dear, which is it shouldn't just be about having a good, correct positioning for your brand within the competitive set and in the right structured way, but actually it's forcing people to make sure that they have a real, genuine, deep and sort of valuable purpose in the world that people value, see as the right thing, and see as being worth us being in existence. Like if people didn't miss us tomorrow and the world didn't miss us tomorrow, we're not probably doing enough to merit being the ones that we charge valuable money from our consumers for over another. So the focus on purpose, I think, is a very good thing, not just for us as marketeers and not just for consumers, but also for the future of the world and the planet and sustainability, which is obviously where we're now putting a lot of our focus. And actually, I believe for a couple of years is going to become the key defining element that makes something luxury or not. Worth paying more for is a concept that itself also moves and shifts and evolves with the time. If you're not looking after the planet and you want to charge the earth for a product that no one needs, then you're going to not be able to. You're going to need to make sure that that worth and that value, that perceived sort of high aspirational sort of quality, is based on the fact that you're doing good things for the future generations that will inherit everything from us in a good state. That will be worth paying more for. And already we're seeing a huge boost in consumer segments that make their decisions based on those elements rather than on how they feel or how good they look, which are sort of surface and still important, but have to have a depth behind them as well, more and more to define themselves as luxury. That's as quick as I could have gone through all of that. I have got a couple of examples, which I won't do because they're video, and if you can barely hear my voice, I don't want to risk the bandwidth. So if everyone's happy, why don't I come out of sharing my screen and we can start a discussion.
Thank you very much, Paul. Really appreciate that, and handling the tech expertly.
I mean, we've all had to learn live, haven't we, really?
Indeed we have. I think we're all a little bit more forgiving nowadays. I'll start off some questions as we wait for some of them to come in from our 97 attendees. So in terms of luxury, how do you define that?
Well, I guess I sort of started to touch on it with my last point, but I refuse to sort of have a fixed definition is the first thing. I think the old definition of it was very obvious to everyone. It was about a sense of distance between yourself and where you wanted to be. And so it was almost on a pedestal. It was aloof in a sense. It was sort of removed from you deliberately and kept away from you because that was in a world where everyone aspired to be something that they couldn't feel was accessible to them. So to feel better and to feel more aspirational, they paid to sort of bring that into their lives from far away. I think that was probably what the old definition and accepted definition of luxury was. But even in my time, in the 10 years I've been in various luxury businesses, I've watched it literally shift before our very eyes into something that's much more about how you see yourself and wish to be and are on the way to being. And you, because of the digital world, because everything is much more attainable and real time and feels much closer, things that are still very, very far away are more and more and more irrelevant. So luxury isn't about how far it is from your life. It's about how much it adds to your current life, because you can decide more flexibly and more widely on anything these days. So therefore you'll decide on the things that make your life better for you accordingly, and you'll pay handsomely if they feel right for your aspirations. So I think it's a much more personal, up close and individual definition. And I think, yeah, more and more and more, the core of it is the single question, which is this really worth the money? And being worth the money changes like very, very quickly, and so do luxury companies need to. So like literally even like within the next 6 months, you'll spot a number of product developments and more sustainable sort of packaging and all sorts of things that we're, without needing to or without being asked, already realizing we need to sort of put into the heart of all of our like highest valuable products, because they will make it more valuable and they'll make people want to still decide that they're all still worth paying more for than anything else. And that'll be based on things that are less economic, much more individual and much more future proofed, I think.
Yeah. And so you spoke about the kind of increased acceleration of digitization and how you're taking a very much digital first approach. Do you think you can create luxury experiences virtually? Vicky Wright is asking.
Oh God, that's a great question. This was a humdinger of a question. First and foremost, I'm an eternal optimist. Like I refuse to ever be sort of like made to sort of like desist or sort of give up. So my immediate instinctive answer is going to be always yes, definitely. Is it easy, or is it completely obvious? No, definitely not. But yes, I think it is. I think I'll start by sort of backing that up with a single point, which is the wealthiest, most high net worth individuals, which is what we tend to call that segment of people in the world, are all like the ones with the least amount of time, probably not the ones that are going into shops to buy anything, let alone stuff that they're willing to pay for. It either comes to them, or they do all their own research in between the various sorts of meetings or sorts of other sort of schedules they have that make them who they are. And we found at Burberry very, very significantly that it was our most valuable customers who were spending most time stuck to their mobile phones. And they were doing their research, not by talking to anyone, not even by spending much time on our website. They were literally micro research. Once they come to a product page for like 10 seconds and then they'd be gone again. Over the course of maybe a very busy month, they quietly, in very small bursts, do all of the research on a digital device. So I think more and more and more, it's not can you build luxury propositions and experiences on a digital device. I think you have to, if you really want to be the newest, most up-to-date version of luxury and attract the most valuable customers out there. They expect you to be able to talk to them in a very direct way, and that's digital. And I think the direct relationship is what the luxury element of it. It doesn't have to look luxury because that's up to them. But if you can make it work for them, then you're worth paying for.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Another question from our audience. So Liesl McDonald has asked, what will be the impact for the luxury sector, do you think, in terms of the economic pressures that are to come? Obviously, disposable income is less of a burden potentially for that particular demographic, but what's your kind of forecasting looking like?
God, I wish I had a crystal ball. It's the first thing to say. I don't think anyone knows, and I can guarantee this in terms of our own internal conversations, without sort of, going into too much delicate detail. There's not a single person in the whole of LVMH that could predict the answer to that question. I think you just have to pay attention in the small moments, make the right decisions before you have to. Change the model according to how you can still get to the end consumer. Except that for now, it's going to be less. There's going to be less of it. It's going to be less capable or possible. But people are still human beings. We're all still wanting the same things and wishing we could be out with our friends and do all the things. So the more that we can bring stuff into people's homes and into their worlds, we won't make the same amount of profit immediately, but we'll make enough to be stable and to work out what the new world is going to be like. Because I don't think it will go back, and I don't think it necessarily should, because we should always move forwards. So I can't predict it, but every single one of the houses within LVMH, of which there are obviously quite an impressive number, remain positive, and think that whatever the world will be, the way we'll deliver value will be looking after the planet. That's becoming more and more and more a key focus, and doing more for people away from physical spaces.
Excellent. Okay, so on the purpose point, because you touched on that in your presentation as well, do you think, or what, if you could take one good thing that has come out of this current crisis forward into creating our new normal, but what would it be?
Do you know what, I'm going to go, I know you're saying one new thing, but it's actually one of the oldest things in our entire portfolio, but it's definitely the best example of how to take the right new learning from something that you need to do now, but has always been there, which is, I'm sure most people have at least heard of one of our products called Veuve Clicquot, which is the champagne with a big bright yellow label. Some of you may know, some of you may not, what Veuve Clicquot, the name actually is. It's actually the lady who started the first champagne house, which is Veuve Clicquot. It's in English, the widow Clicquot, because she was widowed as a young woman by her husband, whose business it was. No one expected a woman then to even be in business, or even was accepted in business. But it was hers, because she lost her husband when she was barely 20 something, and it was only hers, and so she had to do something about it. Most people expected her to sort of give it up, sell it off, or to just let it sort of dwindle. But over the course of 9 years, she stubbornly refused to listen to anyone's advice. Any man, any sort of expert, anyone in the family, anyone else who was trying to help or thought that it was an insurmountable task. She didn't just create the entire label and the success that it's become. She also did it all defiantly and with patience, and in an ever-changing world that was against her, around her. 300 or so years later, that Veuve Clicquot is so still relevant, that she had that purpose that will still continue to be relevant beyond my years on this planet. And the way that I think it's already done brilliantly for the world as a purpose and for the brand is next year, so 2021, will be the 50th year of the Businesswoman of the Year award, which was created by the Champagne House to honour the original Businesswoman of the Year. 50 years, think about that for a second. So count back 50 years ago from today, and to think that a champagne created the idea of awarding women for being excellent in business. And in the recent times, so this year, we've decided to widen it beyond just the sort of accepted, financial, almost macho description of what a businessman should be, and then how close a woman could become to that. It's now letting all that shed away and just go, who's being really bold, who's being really brave in this world, who's striking out in front. And that's as much, if not more, a female trait. And there's many, many brilliant women who aren't necessarily running a business or in business, but are doing incredible things that will lead them to become entrepreneurs and pioneers in the future. And so this year, our shortlist that was announced, to great controversy, was very bold and started to award a wider, more impressive number of entrepreneurial women doing different things that weren't considered as the sort of accepted wisdom of business. And I think that will set us in good stead. So I think that's the thing that immediately comes to mind. I know it's not a direct answer to your question, but I can't think of a better one.
Excellent. Okay. And on the purpose point, Graham's asking, will purpose before profit be a luxury post-crisis?
Oh, I wish that's almost a nasty question, Graham. Exactly why you're asking it, because the answer, unfortunately, will have to be pragmatic. I don't think there's a black or white answer to that one. Luxury is luxury because it's because the end product or the end price charged for that product is a lot. It's immediately easy to think that therefore it's easy to make money as a luxury business. The opposite is true, actually, if you're doing it properly, right? To remain a luxury item over decades or even centuries, as I was just talking about, you have to put a lot of time, effort, thought, and your own sunk costs into getting to the consumer at the very end, which justifies a lot of the price, not all of it. I think the more good you are and the more reputation you sustain, then the profit can start to rise exponentially. But in a world where that's not affordable, where do you go? You can't diminish the product. You can't charge more for it necessarily. So you have to revolve. You have to find clever ways to deliver that value in ways that aren't about money. So ironically, I think the most valuable luxury products tomorrow will be the ones that aren't based on monetary concepts, but actually will be perceived value. I think that will genuinely be the thing that will drive higher value in the future if it's at all possible.
Sorry, you just cracked
up. Was that a Weasley answer?
Excellent answer, but you cracked up at the very end. Could you just repeat your last sentence?
Oh. So I said yes. So if at all possible, I'm pretty sure that it will be perceived value and things like looking after the planet that drive what we hope will be LVMH's sort of higher value in the future. If any of us can do it, I genuinely believe that the wider group that we're part of can.
Fantastic, thank you. On the post-coronavirus world then, to touch back on that, do you think consumer behaviour really will change? I suppose there's an awful lot of research and anecdotal evidence in terms of survey responses, etc., that says people generally don't really want to go back to normal. They want to have this great sort of more acute social awareness, etc. Do you think in practice that will actually happen?
So you can see me vigorously nodding. I've never believed, even before lockdown, that the world ever stays the same. It will, it is constantly moving forward and changing and never goes back. And the more we embrace the fact that it will never go back, the better our futures become. Not just as businesses, but also just as beings. Look forwards, embrace change, and actually start with yourself. I think if I were to just quietly ask you all to decide for yourselves whether you're going back to how you were a couple of months ago, and not adding anything new or changing any of your behaviours in a couple of months' time. I know I don't agree with that. There's things that I will not still be doing, and even if I can go out, I'll still think about whether I want to go out and whether it's correct to go out, or whether actually I've learned there are other ways of doing it rather than going out. That's a very sort of simplistic way of thinking about it, but I'm willing to bet that most of us know already that the world isn't going back, and that's because we're not either. We'll adapt, we'll evolve or sort of bring in sort of new sort of ways of doing things that we've learned because we've had to, but then when we don't have to, we still want to. And that's a good thing, I think. Yeah. It just means we all have to stay on our toes and stay alert and listen to ourselves and listen to the other human beings that we're trying to sell to.
Absolutely. Building on that then, and this is potentially an unfair question because you might want some time to think about it, but coming in from the audience, what's your perspective on the kind of Black Lives Matter movement and how brands will and can respond to that?
Get your own house in order. We've been talking about this live. In fact, I've been very vocal within the company and actually have been therefore even not willingly, but to my surprise, become the focus of questions from all sorts of directions within the company, asking me what to do, which is not why I was vocal, but just because I genuinely believed that it's not for brands to suddenly out of nowhere get involved in that conversation. That's crass, that's superficial. It's also very easily judged to be cynical or opportunist or just not correct. I think what we did, and I still believe this to be just an honourable sort of approach, was we shut off all of our advertising. We made sure that there were not even any sorts of like bots or software or sort of things that could like slip out and like suddenly pop up as sponsored posts. It was, and I realized that just through flicking through my own feed, having sort of like made everything on my social media like blackout. As I scrolled through, the only interruptions to the very, very solemn and brilliantly sort of wide response that Tuesday was sponsored ads from brands, and it just looked so dumb. So being dumb is wrong. Being suddenly vocal and not needed to be vocal is also wrong. So therefore our response was to be quiet and actually to use the time behind closed doors to make sure that your actions and your own sort of house were correct before speaking up. So thankfully, obviously, we are already trying to be better for the world and make sure that that's part of our inherent value, but we're not completely there yet, and neither should we be expected to be, but certainly we won't be speaking on that matter until we feel that we're at the forefront of it. And I don't think brands will ever be unless their businesses are based on delivering that equality that's so sorely overdue.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, good answer. Well done. On your point about memorability, so moving away from the idea of the things that are potentially dumb for brands to be doing within the current context, what brand experiences have you had as a customer that have been memorable?
Oh God, that's how funny is that? That should be harder for me to suddenly instinctively answer than that whop of a topic from before. Sadly, I think I'm already answering the question because I'm struggling to think of an experience that I can genuinely remember.
Yeah.
There must be one. I'm just sort of like.
We can let it stew away in the background.
Let me come back to that one. I will keep thinking about it, but yeah, it's already half answered because not many memorable that I've been able to recall so far.
Yeah, and that's, as you said.
But actually, you know what? I'll jump up with one of them. Netflixparty.com. It was immediate. I think it was within the week. I barely even started to think about what we were going to respond with, and I'm generally the one who's the most on the case with that sort of thing, to the point where I'm generally regarded as a bit of a hassle in most companies that I work with because I'm always on everyone's case to make sure that we don't miss a trick. But Netflix caught me completely sleeping. Like it was brilliant. It was simple. It was immediate, and it was just correct. And it wasn't overdone. It was just what we all needed at a moment that we hadn't even realised we needed it. And I still remember that, and I probably will afterwards as well.
Fantastic. So in terms of questions from the audience, Amanda Hamilton is asking, what impact has rapid growth in Amazon had on your brands, your portfolio, and particularly with regards to retaining that luxury status?
Well, you know what? You must be a mind reader or just like paying attention, because as of the middle of June, so within a week, we will enter Amazon completely and officially across our main range of all of the different champagnes, wines and spirits. Specifically because, in fact, actually during my interview process, I got asked about a particular controversial discussion that was going on live in the company that I was hoping to join, which was, should they dare to go near Amazon or not? And would it be a disaster for the brands and their image and the value, or is it the right way forward? And I immediately and instinctively said, we have to. Of course we should be in Amazon because we already are, right? So I think the question is probably based on the fact that a lot of champagne from our own organisation is already being sold widely on Amazon, but just not by us. So it's a mess. In fact, it's actually scary to, well, as we've done the audit, preparing to sort of like officially partner with Amazon. Yeah, it's been a horror show of the bad behaviour, not because it's deliberate, but just because it's amateur or very independent, and it's done according to what's quickest or like best for the bottom line third parties, and therefore it's not a great customer experience, it's not a great brand experience, and it's not the best that it could be within Amazon until we take control and do it properly. And I'm very, very pleased to say that we're about to do it properly, and everyone's now gone from unsure or frightened of doing it to absolutely excited about finally being able to like start and do more and more and more of it. I'm even being asked now by like the champagne houses like Dom Perignon, for instance, whether or not their like highest of highest sort of very niche products will be allowed to be involved, which is a complete turnaround. Like they wouldn't have gone near what they would have seen as a transactional sort of marketplace before, but suddenly now they want to be involved, and I'm saying not yet, because I need to make sure that everything else works before we put our crown jewels sort of into the mix. But yeah, so we're fully embracing that, and I can't wait.
Excellent. Fabian's asking, what are the new luxury brands, companies that you're paying attention to, and why?
Back to sort of going to sound like a stuck record, but the ones that really impress me are the ones that are changing their revenue model and their purpose to not looking after the finances, or just looking after the finances, but making sure that that P&L is based on looking after the world. So the inherent value of new startups and what I think are new luxury are how much do they do for the planet, and how smartly have they structured themselves from the ground up to make sure that everything in their value chain is worth paying more for, because it doesn't do harm, it looks after the people, it looks after nature, and it looks after the future of the planet. And there's a number of those in our own area. People talk a lot, I think, about Seedlip, which is the famous sort of first sort of non-alcoholic spirit that presented itself as an expensive sort of alcohol alternative. I think it started the sort of ball rolling, but actually, I don't think it'd be the one that wins, because it's already sort of losing sort of in the image or perception game, because the experience of the actual sort of liquid, the smarter ones that are organically or built it genuinely on plant material, or actually by barmen and mixologists who know exactly what goes well in an actual alcoholic cocktail. So therefore, if they're going to use something like Seedlip, they're making their own, and they're making it sustainable, and it's really smart, and they're sort of the audience they're getting is because of how smart they've designed it from the get-go. So that's what's impressing me in our industry. And there's a load of ones across fashion that like can be both immediate and sort of like do bespoke products, but get it to you like quicker than most normal products, and they'll do it in a way that's like good for the planet. So there's lots going on, and actually gives me genuine sort of belief that humans always like eventually get it right, but just the smart ones that do it first.
Fantastic. And it kind of building on, you touched on fashion there, so obviously you have a background there, and Jared's asking, taking some of the learnings with that being a very quick moving and innovative dynamic industry, what did that change in terms of your perceptions towards your new brand portfolio? What have you taken forward learnings wise?
Oh, okay. Well, actually, I never really felt like I fitted in fashion. I don't think that's the right word. I was originally, when I moved into the fashion world, it was to join Burberry, and they were deliberately looking for someone outside of their world to help them solve their own internal sort of ways of working and make them more digital, and sort of build a brand in a way that they felt too insular to be able to do themselves. So I was always the sort of the outlier or the outsider, it like allowed in, because they felt they needed what I could like bring to them. And I sort of kept that sort of healthy sense of not being completely in fashion for the whole time, because it helped me actually not get caught up in a lot of the obsession with the new, rather than like remembering what made the brand interesting and valuable in the first place, and should continue to be an underlying current. So I was always the ones like turning backwards and going, remember where we started, remember why the trench coat is called a trench coat. Like, you know, that's something really special, that no matter how many new things we do, we should never lose sight of, because it's what makes us relevant in the world. It's why people like love us already. So to continue to make them love us and find new ways to do that, we can't throw everything we've done in the past that got us here. So I've always been a history student when it comes to looking forwards. I've always thought that the best answer you can possibly start with has already happened. You just need to find it, cherish it, redevelop it, and evolve it constantly for new situations and ways that are like future relevant, rather than just boring old history lessons. It's the same trick I've done for most of the brands throughout my career: is start from where they were originally from, and then make that suddenly newly relevant in a modern world that is the surprise, and that's the newness. And so therefore I was actually delighted to be able to join a company that is very proud of all of its very, very sort of almost ancient brands. Like I said, some of the brands that I'm currently now asked to curate have been around for centuries, and people love them. I think the thing I've discovered on joining this company is that can cause a different issue, which is they've always spent their whole careers looking after brands that are already widely loved and widely valued. So therefore, it's easy for them to miss a trick of how to continue to make that a thing, rather than just rest on what had already happened before they needed to. So that's where I'm focusing on, is like making sure that we're on the top of our game and always moving forwards, rather than thinking that because we've always been loved, we always will be, which is not true.
Yeah, that's fair. So Nick is asking, given your focus on the champagne sector, what's your thoughts on the meteoric rise of Prosecco?
But now, bear in mind, I've been in the industry for 6 months, so I'm in no way an expert, and I'd never claimed to be. Also, we don't have a Prosecco. I think it's probably fair to say that most of my colleagues who have champagne in their blood have always sort of widely disregarded Prosecco, because it's Italian, not French. It's not allowed to be called champagne, and it's drunk and sort of used in very, very different occasions and scenarios. So I think they sort of not quite turned a blind eye, but didn't need to worry about it in a way, because it was just a very different product for a very different wallet and a very different moment in time. I think that's probably still true. But interestingly, I think where the focus is, and was already becoming before I got here, is we actually do have a sparkling wine, which is a very, very sort of big business, but has never quite succeeded in this market, which is Chandon, which is a South American sparkling wine made with the same method as champagne is, but in the New World. And because we've never really got to grips with what Prosecco is about and its position in people's lives, we've never quite been able to convince them to switch from Prosecco to one of our sparkling wines. And I think therefore, by learning about why Prosecco works and how we can improve that for people the way that they want it, that's the way that Chandon will become more of a success in our home market. And I'm pleased to say I've just this week seen the new sort of brand and the sort of plans, and I'm excited to see. I think it's got a good chance of working, but it's you guys that will decide. But yes, we have to be like Prosecco, not like champagne looking down on Prosecco, and that's the first thing. It's about being humble and appealing to people on their terms for sparkling wine rather than champagne. But yeah, that's as much as I've learned so far, but I've got a lot to learn yet. I'm
happy to be your guinea pig if you want to test it. That's absolutely fine.
I'm sure there's 90 odd people that might agree with you.
When we spoke before, you talked a lot about your kind of how important people were to you in that side of your job. And Whitney is asking, what advice would you give to kind of students or aspiring marketers looking to get into the luxury brand sector?
Always be true to yourself. Know who you are. This has never served me badly in my career, and it makes it look like I planned it all, but I didn't. All I did was pay attention to my heart and soul in the quiet moments before any even small decision that therefore looked after the sort of the whole narrative. By which I mean, I'll give you one example. In fact, my very first ever job after university, I applied for just before the deadline, because I'd only just found out it was the deadline that day. The 20 minutes before the deadline, in the square in central London, in front of the office that I'd just got the application form from. and got the job. Not because I'm brilliant or because I'm a genius at filling out forms. I think quite the opposite. It's because I had no time to second guess myself. I had no time to sort of analyze what they might be looking for or the best way to fit with their version of the world, or trying to be anything other than who I was. And what I learned from that, not what I knew before, I've been finding myself doing that. If I had anything else but myself and had either succeeded or failed in the application, it wouldn't have worked for either of us, because I'd have lied to get it, and therefore they'd have got something that they didn't want. I wouldn't have been happy and unwanted. Or I would have tried to be someone else and still failed, and therefore never known anything that had been a better idea. So by being yourself, if you don't get it, then that's a good thing, because you weren't right for it, and they probably wouldn't have liked you if you had succeeded in putting the wool over their eyes. But by getting it and knowing that you got it because it's who you are and it's come from you, you can only ever strike forward and keep doing that and have more fulfilling sort of advancement, however that might develop and wherever that might take you. So I can't guarantee to anyone that they will make a success in their chosen career unless they pay attention and work out that by being themselves, it's the career for them. I know that's a deep and sort of not quite direct answer, but it's the truth. And I think it will be the answer in the end.
Fantastic. And I think this is, unfortunately, there's a lot of questions, so clearly people are finding this fascinating. But the last question for you before we have to do some wrap up, I think, what do you think the biggest risk has been that you've taken in your career, and what did you learn from that you could share?
Actually, probably the starting of my own business, which I sort of touched on earlier, with the reason why I suddenly realised that forgetting the business you're in is like a bad idea. That was also probably the day that I realised I'd taken a really, really huge risk without properly thinking it through. I'd been frustrated in the advertising agency where I was a managing partner, convinced that digital was going to take over the world, and that behaviour was going to end up taking everything that way. No one else agreed with me, because the business was in selling very expensive television adverts and winning awards for them, and it was still making them money. So why on earth would they let this outspoken oik tell them to throw away and try something they'd never done before and had no idea what they're any good at? So I left. And probably, if I look back on it, if I had to summarise it, it probably could be summarised as the stroppy kid marches out the door, says, "I'll show you all," without having any idea what was outside that door and whether or not they could. Thankfully, history will look kindly on me, because and now, years later, everyone regards me as being the one who was first onto it and caught them all by surprise. But actually, I'm very quickly able to say that I caught myself by surprise and realised only after I'd done something hugely risky that it was even a risk. So that was definitely the biggest risk I've taken, and I did it without realising what I was doing. I believed in it, so I was still myself, so maybe that's what carried me through. But it wasn't, it was done in a very risky way, and it terrified me when I realised. Funny enough though, I wouldn't change it if I went back.
Good. Okay, so you learned to keep taking risks.
Yeah. Yes. Because the world moves forward, and that's the definition of risk. We don't know what will happen tomorrow, and if we think it's going to be the same as yesterday, that's the biggest risk.
Fantastic. And I was going to ask you to, and I still will, but that was a beautiful sentence almost to round things up. But if you could leave anybody or everybody on this call with one thought, what would it be? Your kind of closing remark?
Look after yourselves and the world and each other before you become a marketeer, because that is what a marketeer is.
Excellent.
Anyway, okay.
Thank you so much.
I've really enjoyed it. Sorry it has to be cut short, but we've all got things to do.
No, thank you. And I'm sorry we can't answer all the questions today, but you've been superb, really open and honest. So appreciate that.
Pleasure. Sorry that the tech wasn't brilliant, but I hope we got there.
Not to worry. No, I think we got most of it, but no, thank you very much. Also,
good. Take care all.
Big thanks to our event partner, Lux, who organised this. There's a lot of other exciting Marketing Society Scotland events coming up, so I'll tell you about those quickly. There's a webinar on the 9th of June running from 2 till 3 o'clock in the afternoon, which is all about brand resilience in transformative times, which will involve Lander's Global Chief Strategy Officer, Thomas Ardell, and he'll be coming together with us to share his brand strategy and how they're staying relevant, reinventing themselves, and tuned in to respond to the difficulties coming their way at the moment. There's then Amplify, which will be a series of virtual events, which will start from Monday the 24th of August, running through to Friday the 28th of August. And you can check out all the details of that on the website. I think Lux is also going to post a link into the chat now for us. And finally, there's Digital Day on the 2nd of September, which will also now run as an online event. Now, the other thing that you should see pop up any minute in the chat is also an immediate poll for some feedback. We would really appreciate if you could just take a minute to complete this. It's very quick and easy, but it means that we can ensure we keep delivering the most relevant content to you. And that just leaves me to say thank you to everybody for joining us, to Paul, to Lux, to all of our delegates and attendees, and stay safe, look after yourselves.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you. Thanks, Kat.